All right, college football fans, welcome to the show, First and 10. Josh and Joe here. Joe, how you doing today?
I'm good, man. How about you?
Pretty good, pretty good. You ready to get into this slate? We're past last week. It's all done. It's over with. I'm still waiting to see the Oregon shirt.
It's on order. I know. I got it for you. I'm hoping it'll be here for our reaction show.
So for you that don't know, Joe is if Ohio State won, I was going to wear an Ohio State shirt, and if Oregon won, he's wearing the Oregon shirt. So it'll be coming up here soon. We'll be doing an episode with him in an Oregon shirt. Will be great.
They're hard
But
to
I like
find
your
in Ohio.
sweatshirt and I like your hat. Those look good on you, man. All right, so let's go ahead and get started for the predictions for this week. We're going to start with Oregon, who's a 27.5-point road favorite at Purdue. My initial take is obviously it was like this is like nothing. This is just roll in there, take care of business, go home. Digging into it though, with the quarterback change, Ryan Brown, he threw for almost 300 and looked the part. They almost upset an Illinois team that I think is pretty good. And that was at like 50-49, right? Like that they were just like in this battle all of a sudden. And the freshman goes for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he rushed for 118 yards. So they're a completely different team with him at the helm all of a sudden. It's just like you want to talk about instant spark, instant change. And so if you're an Oregon fan and you don't know the history of Purdue, teams go to Purdue to get upset. I mean, that's just kind of that's what happens. And I would say that's sort of like what Stanford was in the old Pac-12. Was like you go down there and funny things happen on the farm. Teams go there and their seasons are lost for some reason or another. And that's the way that I kind of view Purdue in the Big Ten. And so now they have a reason. So Oregon, you have a reason to be concerned right now. And so throw that 27.5-point spread out the window. You could throw all the stats out the window because if you just look at the stats, they're so in favor of Oregon. And there's a few games today. My theme a little bit is throw the stats out the window this week in some of the games that we're looking at, and we'll get into why on a couple of those games. But this is definitely one of them because Purdue's a completely different team. Now, on offense, they're a completely different team. Now, on defense, they got issues on defense, and that's one of the big things. Their rushing defense ranks among the worst in the country, 126th, and they're giving up about 228 yards a game. Now, Oregon's only running it for about 162, but they've played against some better defenses, and so especially the one that they played against last week, which they had to fight for every yard that they were getting, and so those numbers could be a little bit skewed. But if I'm Oregon, I'm trying to establish the run for sure in that game, and it's going to be really interesting to see how motivated Purdue comes out because again they haven't stopped the run well. They allow 39 points a game. Their passing defense is 87th at 227. So defensively, not a great look for Purdue, not a great matchup for Purdue, even probably in the trenches. Not great all around. But again, I'm going to use the word caution, Oregon fans, caution. Because if Ryan Brown has another performance like that should concern you because that Illinois defense is not a bad defense. That's actually a good defense. They held Penn State to 21 points, and Purdue put up 49 points on them. So, all right, Joe. So, what do you think about this game?
Yeah, it's a completely different team, right? It's they took they took Purdue. They took Illinois to the task better than Nebraska did. They had more yards passing, more total yards on offense. But like you said, it just can't fix that defense. So I guess their hope now is just to outscore opponents. And as you mentioned, I've seen a lot of good teams go to West Lafayette and just to have it won't be a season ruining loss per se, with the 12-team playoff, but yeah, I've had a lot of heartache there myself. I've seen some Ohio State teams go there to just to like what is going on. So I guess like the main thing is, and I'm not Dan Lanning. I don't foresee this being an issue, but just a short week, and then such an emotional. We've seen teams not perform up to expectations after such like an emotional game the week before. We all obviously know about the Vanderbilt and Alabama game. So, I mean, I guess that's the only thing you really have to guard against. And And like you said, not to Dan Lanning's telling his team, not don't look at any of the numbers. Don't assume this is the same team as for the first 6 weeks of the season, because it's not. And because they've been able to throw the ball, at least that last game, and perform a lot better than what they had, earlier in the season.
Right, right, yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see how Oregon attacks them. It looks like they have a clear advantage in the run game, but this is going to be really interesting. I wonder, defense travels. Obviously, Oregon's defense looks really good. I'll be interested to see. This is their first true road test as far as Big Ten travel goes. Like I said before, they went to UCLA, but that's a trip they make every other year normally in the Pac, or they're a Southern Cal trip every other year for many years. So that's an easy trip. It's a direct flight or an easy flight. This is you traveling cross country to an area you haven't been. So, and a potential huge letdown game. After that big emotional win, we watched Alabama. Case in point right there, Alabama. Is that going to happen again? I don't think it is, and that's just because I think Oregon can run the football. I think they can, and I think they're, obviously they should win in the trenches. They should win in a lot of places. Am I going to take Oregon in 27.5? No chance. Am I going to take that based on all the other games that they've played, and just they're 2-4, whatever, 2-5, whatever they are right now against the spread, and so I don't think that's a game that I would touch as far as the point spread goes, but I do think Oregon's probably going to win this game. I've got this game pegged at like 35-20, which might seem a little bit low. But I almost see Purdue jumping out a little bit early, having that home crowd advantage, a lot of energy. This is a Friday night. Oregon's going on a short week after an emotional victory. And not that Purdue didn't have their own emotional, letdown, but they are, when teams like this come into town, this is their Super Bowl. And so Purdue they don't have a ton to play for this season right now with their record and everything else. They're just trying to make the postseason, but so for every time a big team comes here, this is going to be, you're going to get their absolute best shot. So I've got like a 35-20. I was at 45-20 before, and I just kind of adjusted that down. I'm expecting some road errors and whatnot, and so I'm comfortable with a 15-point win, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's almost like depending on where you're at as far as the teams go. Like you said, Oregon's guarding against a letdown game. I almost kind of thought that game last week for Purdue, maybe that's an inspiring game. Like now they're like, okay, we made a change, and so maybe it gives them a little bit more confidence as for the rest of the season. It's kind of a new start for them. But I actually did take Oregon to go 45 to 20 against Purdue. The spread was just a little bit too much for me coming on a short week, and it's such a game last week against Ohio State. So yeah, I couldn't quite do the cover, but yeah, I picked Oregon 45-20.
Yeah, so we'll see. I'm excited to watch them on the road, see how they recover from last week. Are they going to be on schedule? Is the offense going to be, hitting? I sent you that video of them, planning to take shots of against Ohio State. You wonder what they're gonna do against Purdue. And I think it's the game plan's probably got to be run the football really well, and right. establish a run and suck the life out of them early. Would be, at least that's the way I would be thinking about it. So but it'll be interesting to see if we experience a letdown game. So all right, so you and I both have Purdue covering then.
Right.
So I like that. Okay. BYU, Oklahoma State. All right. So you have to throw the stats out when you're looking at BYU because there's no rhyme. You look at it, there's like, it's tough to find out how are they undefeated? They're 9.5 point, favorite once again at home. Oklahoma State comes, reeling with all sorts of questions. There was a story that Mike Gundy got headbutted by his cow or one of his cattle. I saw that. He said maybe the cattle have been watching us play too.
Yeah, he did.
Pretty funny stuff there. BYU does it with turnovers. They do it with defense, opportunistic. And Oklahoma State comes in and they've got just really, if you look at them statistically, I mean, it's not good. They're 110th in passing offense at 285. Like that's a pretty brutal stat there. I'm sorry, that's passing defense, right? Their rush defense is 235, so they're 94th against. I mean, that's a ton of yards that defense has just given up. It's ugly. It's ugly. Rushing offense, this is the biggest surprise of the season, having Ollie Gordon, though. At 91 yards a game is all you can get with Ollie Gordon as your running back. They're 125th. And so they're still able to score a little bit, but it's perplexing that they can't run the football. And you look at this game and you go, well, okay, scoring defense, BYU they're 15th in scoring defense, 16.3 points, and their pass defense, 188.3. Their run defense, they give about 121 a game. And so all the stats really are heavy in BYU's favor, in this game. And so I don't know if BYU's on borrowed time, and this is the same thing I did last year. I felt with a couple teams. Washington was one of them. I always felt like they were on borrowed time. I truly felt like Michigan was on borrowed time. That obviously wasn't the case, so what the hell do I know? But at the end of the day, I'm wondering if Oklahoma State, this is one that I think is going to be a lot closer. This game, I don't want to say Oklahoma State's going to win, outright, but I kind of have that, my gut feeling is telling me that they are going to win outright. So I have them winning 23-20. I have them winning 23-20 because BYU is really, they're not great on offense. In Oklahoma, it takes Oklahoma State to put together one solid game on defense, and people aren't thinking, oh, this is going to be, this is at BYU, they're tough. I just call it a feeling, call it something weird. I have Oklahoma State going in and pulling a 23-20 upset.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Like those BYU stats, they just don't make any sense, and they scream borrowed time because if they don't maybe get a fortunate turnover or have a game with multi turnovers, they're not going they don't win some of these games that they've won earlier in the year. And then like you were mentioning about Oklahoma State, it's just their passing offense is pretty good. I mean, like they have which is like you mentioned, complete reverse from last year. I was looking up Ollie Gordon's stats from this year to last year. Right now he's at 384 yards. Last year at this time he had 534 yards after 6 games. But it was funny. The first 3 games of last year, I don't know how this guy ended up winning the Doak Walker the award winner for best running back. Is his first game he had 44 yards. Second game he had 53 yards. His third game he only had 12 yards. So I guess maybe it's like a second half kind of back or something like that. But and he's still got time to turn it on. He's still got half the season. But he's not going to catch Jeanty because Jeanty's already over 1,200 yards. And so that's kind of amazing. I think Ollie Gordon finished with 1,600 yards last year and won the Doak Walker. And Jeanty's already at 1,200 yards after 6 games. That guy's can't help but mention him every podcast, I think. But yeah, I feel BYU. This game is at home, so that's one thing they have going in their favor. And I do think they're going to pull this one out. I have them winning 30-20. But and the only reason I feel comfortable saying that is just because of Oklahoma State's defense. They just haven't been good at all. And in their offense, they're having a hard time on first down. They're like ranked 93rd in first downs, and their first down defense is 125th. So they're giving up a lot. So I'm almost on the opposite end of it. I wonder if maybe Oklahoma State's defense is something to boost BYU's offense. So
gotcha. What was your score again?
It was BYU 30, Oklahoma State 20. I have them covering.
Gotcha. Okay. That's probably a smart money bet. Every time I go with that, I think there's going to be an upset. It's all bad. But I don't know. It's weird for me. That whole BYU situation is weird. But I mean, good on them to be 6-0, to be undefeated. I mean, I can't believe we're talking about that, right? And you look at the stat sheet and it just doesn't make sense. And so I'm like, you use the analogy of water finds its level, and it's probably a dangerous game to be picking the water to find its level. That's what I actually think is going to happen this game. They're going to play a sloppy game, and so that's the way that I'm looking at it. And it's just because this would be the game if you were going to take your foot off the throttle. This would be the game that you might do that, right? Because at the end of the day, these are kids, playing. They're young men, right? But they're young men that have emotion and get distracted and do all that. So we'll see. This will be a really interesting challenge, for them, a coaching challenge for Kalani, because it's going to be a tough. They're going to have. I think keeping them focused for this game, we're going to see if this team has the wherewithal to maybe run the table. So I think we're going to learn a lot about them right now. So sometimes it's, against the big teams, it's easy to get up for. Against the teams that they're coming in and they're reeling, that's really when you learn a lot about your team and how locked in they are and how can they dominate that game. They did that against Arizona last week, which I was really impressed with. And so then that's what makes me wonder is, like, can they do it again? But, they've proved everybody wrong so far. So, all right, so we're going, let's go to Miami, Louisville. Oh boy, this could be a really. This is an interesting matchup. So, Miami obviously has played a couple really close games. Got some. Miami right now could be a 2-loss team. They could be 4-2 going into this game, just as easily. Two instant replay calls that went their way that probably shouldn't have went their way. Are the difference in them being undefeated versus a 2-loss team. And imagine the narrative around this game. This would be a must-win for Mario Cristobal. Is he going to be on the hot seat if they lose this game? That would be the talk right now if they didn't have the 2 instant replays that went their way. That would be the talk. And so, but I look and so Miami. Statistically they look great. First in scoring offense. Their offense looks great, I should say. Their defense, though, is also good. 26th in scoring defense. Their run defense, they've been really good at stopping the run. They only allow 89 yards a game. To me, that's pretty solid. Louisville, on the other hand, decent, I would say, better than average, defensively. 19.7 points a game, so nothing to scoff at. They're ranked 31st, I think. And then, the offense, Tyler Shuck he's a very good, experienced quarterback, very dependable quarterback. He can hurt you with his arm. He can hurt you with his feet, even though he's not the most graceful runner. But he right. He does. He can do enough. He can do enough. He's kind of that guy that, like, when he gets going too fast, he almost like stumbles forward. Like, he's like kind of I've seen him do it several times. It's just it's funny. But anyway, but he's definitely good enough. They're definitely, I think, a good enough team to beat Miami. I have some questions on if they're going to be able to, to pull that off, because Cam Ward's really good. He's had that Heisman moment, I guess you could say, against Virginia Tech, where on a drive when Miami just has to have it, and they had to play perfect in that fourth quarter against Cal, and they did. It's kind of like, does this team have that it factor? Have they put it all together? Have these 2 very close games galvanized that team in a way that now they're going to really, you see it in basketball all the time, especially in the NCAA tournament. You see it all the time where a 1 seed has like a super close game and almost get knocked out in the second round, and then they come back and they're just galvanized and they just roll people, all the way until like the championship game or something like that. And so it happens in basketball. I wonder if this is kind of that same thing, to where they're going to get galvanized by those couple close games, or is it the exact opposite? And are we just seeing little cracks here and there, and then that's going to burst in this game? I kind of don't think so. I'm thinking this feels to me like a 38-34 Miami win to me. And so that's, I have Louisville covering, but Miami winning 38-34.
Yeah, I agree with you. Those stats sure are pretty for Miami, but they don't really tell like the whole story, because those were 4 games at the beginning of the year that they were able to just, pad those stats against Florida A&M, Ball State, and South Florida. So they kind of in the last two games. I mean, those like you mentioned, those are come down to the last the last few seconds of the game, and yeah, two calls make a huge difference in both those. And luckily for Miami, they both went their way. And Louisville's not a bad team. I mean, they played a tough Notre Dame team, and they won a close one against Virginia. Um, so I mean, but to me, Cam Ward is the difference in this one. I think that he's just that much better than everyone on the field, and I think that Louisville, I think they'll have success. I think they're like you said, their offense is decent, and their defense is pretty good. The best defense that Miami will have played up to this point. But at the end of the day, I think Cam Ward in those last two games when they needed him the most, he was there, and he proved that with the game on the line. So far, the moment hasn't been too big for him, and he was able to get the job done, even if it was a little help from the referee. But I had to pulling this one out. I think Miami winning 33, Louisville 30. So I also have Louisville covering that one, but I think it'll be a close game, and Miami might eke one out with a field goal.
Okay, I like it. A field goal win. So basically, we're going to see Miami in more drama.
Right. Yeah.
That's what you're saying. Another dramatic Canes victory. Yeah, it's kind of becoming a weekly thing, but it's good for Cristobal also to be winning these games that he has lost a lot of in the past. And so that's what makes me think maybe these guys are over the hump now. All right, so Clemson is a 21-point favorite against Virginia. Just really interesting because of the way that Clemson has played. They've obviously, we talked about this on the last show, is I wrote them off, and, now I wrote them off after the Georgia game, really, and now they've done nothing but just gotten better and winning, and the offense is moving the ball, and they look just completely. I mean, obviously, playing Georgia in the first game is just never really a good thing. I mean, look at what Georgia did to Dan Lanning the first time they played, and then look at just how Georgia's just a tough match. You're going against maybe your defense a little, and you do one-on-ones in camp, and then you get maybe a little, you have some scrimmages, but you're playing against the twos and whatnot, and then you go against Georgia's ones. And that's just tough sledding for any offense, I think, to come out of the gate with. So you almost got to look at that and say, okay, if they played again, would it be a more competitive game? Probably, because the offense is probably a lot better. I would think. This game right here, though, it doesn't really look that close to me as I kind of run through everything, and mainly because Virginia's just really bad they're bad on defense and really bad on offense too. I mean, they're not great. And so as I look through, this is one that I didn't spend a ton of time going through this, watching, and really breaking this whole game down. Just because as I'm looking at it, I'm like, to me, unless Clemson totally takes their eye off the ball and, they just lay an egg, I don't see any way that they're not going to absolutely dominate in this game. And so I've got Clemson winning this game 45-10.
Yeah, I agree. Clemson, they played. I was kind of wondering about their defense. Obviously, like you mentioned, the Georgia game. I think everyone expected Georgia to win that one. Georgia put up 34 points on them, but then Appy State, they put up 20 points on Clemson. So, I thought that their defense was going to end up being the strength of their team this year, and I think it had. I think it's right there. The last three games they've only allowed 14 points, 13 points, and then 14 points. So they kind of, I guess, kind of tightened the ship up on defense. And Klubnik, he just continues to impress me as well. I think he's only thrown 2 interceptions, so he's making good decisions with the football. Clemson's only turned the ball over 3 times, so 2 interceptions and 1 fumble lost. So the offense, as you mentioned, is humming. And the defense is, starting to round into shape. I think the way that I thought they were going to play defense this year, I thought that was really going to be the strength of, that Clemson team. Virginia, they're 2-1 in the ACC, and so they're kind of fighting for their life. But I think this was going to knock them out of the picture as far as making it to the title game or whatever aspirations they might have had to get there. And I have Clemson winning this one 41-17.
Okay, all right. So covering, is that covering?
Yep. Yeah, that's cup. Yep.
Okay. Indiana Indiana and Nebraska. So Indiana, really interesting case. You know, I as I was putting my stat sheets together, I'm looking through here and I'm like, bro, Indiana's elite. Like they're elite statistically. Listen to this. They're scoring offense, 47.5 points. They're second scoring offense, 21st in passing offense, 31st in rushing offense. Their defense is 11th in the scoring defense is 11th. Their passing defense 21st, and their rushing defense is 6th. And I was like, whoa, like what am I missing with these guys? And I looked at their schedule. Turn on a little bit of the tape, you know, a couple of the games, and I'm like, okay. So they have played 0 teams with a winning record right now, so that currently have a winning record. FIU, Western Illinois, UCLA, Charlotte, Northwestern, and Maryland. So that explains, I think, a lot. That explains a lot of why those statistics look the way they look. And you look at like that first 70 when you're beating somebody 77-3. I mean, those are kick the statistics off in, you know, like at the beginning of the season the right way for sure. And so it's similar to like what you saw with Tennessee, how Tennessee started the season versus where they're at now, which we'll get to in a minute. But still probably a pretty good football team. They went down to UCLA and they beat the pants off UCLA. I think by more points than Oregon did. Really, you know, dominated that game and whatnot. So that tells you that gives you a little bit. You have a transitive property there with Oregon, you know, a comparable win. And so that's probably a good thing. Nebraska, I thought they were really good at the beginning of the season. You know, they beat Colorado convincingly. We were like Matt Rule, you know, year 2, and then they drop a game, and then it's just I back and forth. I'm really not sure what to make of this Nebraska squad. I don't fully know what to think of them. And other than the fact that, you know, that's what happened. You have a young quarterback, and so your teams tend to ebb and flow. You know, when you got a young quarterback, that's a lot of times that could be the nature of your team, because as he goes, the team goes. What's really interesting as far as, you know, the Cornhuskers goes, they play pretty good defense. I mean, right. That's the consistent part about them is they're gonna play really good defense. You know, the offense though, to me, the offense has got to find a little bit more consistency. And so, you know, when you can't run the ball, when you're running for 136 a game, that I think that's what's got to get fixed, because that opens up everything else when you can run the football. And Matt Rule, I kind of figured that they would just be good at running the football. You know, so that's kind of where I'm at with Nebraska. Indiana, I don't know anything about Indiana, so you can look at all the stats and you can ooh and ah about it, but I feel like this is the time where we're going to learn something about Indiana. You know, the Curtis Rourke was the 2022 MAC Player of the Year. He has thrown for 1,752 yards, 14 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Pretty good, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like, pretty good. 10.3 yards average through the air, but again, you go back and you look at, like, they haven't played a defense that's like Nebraska's defense, and so to me, this is going to be a really interesting game. I don't see this as being a super high scoring game. I know Indiana's favored in this game, but I don't know that Nebraska's not going to pull the upset. And so I have Nebraska losing 23-27. So I've got Indiana 27-23.
Yeah, man, I can't believe it. We're sitting here and talking about undefeated Indiana, but you're right. I got the remaining part of their schedule, and it gets real quick, starting with Nebraska this week, because then they got Washington, Michigan State, then they got Michigan, Ohio State, and then they finish with Purdue. So yeah, the second half of their season is going to be a lot different than the first half of their season. But okay, let's give them some credit. You know, they're first in the Big Ten in pass offense, first in passing yards per completion in the Big Ten. You know, Rourke's averaging over 15 yards of completion right now in the conference play. second in rush defense in the Big Ten, fourth rushing offense, second in scoring offense, first in total offense, and second in total defense. They're killing it. And ESPN, they just released today, right before we started the podcast, that ESPN put out their top five Heisman, for the Heisman right now in mid-season. And of course, Ashton Genty's first, Travis Hunter second, Cam Ward's third. And you have two Big Ten quarterbacks, right there in the top five. And one's Dylan Gabriel, of course. And the fifth isn't Drew Aller. It's not Will Howard. It's Curtis Wark. Indiana's got a Heisman candidate on their hands right now. But I don't know if it's going to go the same for the rest of the year. And I'm amazed at what Curt Cignetti has been able to do with this Indiana team. Tom Allen, he recruited defense. He went to Penn State after Manny Diaz got fired and became the defensive coordinator for James Franklin. So I think they've always recruited defense pretty well. And the last couple times they played Ohio State, it's been Ohio State ends up blowing them out what it looks like in the end of the third, fourth quarter just because they have the athletes. But they've been tighter than you would expect against Ohio State, and that's because of Indiana's defense. Offense has been their problem, but man, it hasn't been their problem right now. That's for not this year anyway. And it's funny because Curt Cignetti had one of the best, when they announced him as coach, and he at the halftime of the Hoosiers ball game, he said, my name's Curt Cignetti. He comes from James Madison. He won 85% of the game. He said, all I do is win. Google me. So that was a great quote, and he's right. I mean, he's won 85% of his games at James Madison, and he's undefeated in the Big Ten so far, and with Indiana. But I think this game I probably have the score a little bit high. Yeah, I was kind of looking over the numbers a little bit more when you were talking about the defense, and I think this will probably be more of a defensive battle. I have Indiana pulling this one out. I mean, I think I didn't really talk about Nebraska, but I like you had mentioned, I think that Dylan Raiola, he started off really, really well at the beginning of the year. And then, kind of the freshman, as the competition got tougher, the freshman mistakes started kind of stepping up. And he hasn't made too many. He's playing good football. It's just that, he's kind of managing the game more so than I'm not trying to put him on Cam Ward's level, but him and Nico, actually, both those quarterbacks, we kind of raved about him at the beginning of the year, and they had great couple first games, but now they're kind of more managing the game as far as like the superstar taking over the game. I mean, he's young, he's a freshman. I think he'll get there. He's going to be a very, very good quarterback in the Big Ten. But I think Rourke's better, and I honestly, I think I don't know much about Curt Cignetti, Indiana's head coach, but I kind of like him better than Matt Rule. I mean, I like the confidence, I like the cockiness, and I think his team, the more each week, the more they keep winning, they kind of take on his persona, and I really feel like that's what Matt Rule's always struck me as kind of a goofball. I mean, he talks a big game. He likes to talk a lot off season about Ohio State or other Big Ten nil programs and how Nebraska's going to do more with their talent, even though they don't have a $20 million payroll and this, that, and the other. And I don't know. I think that's kind of, I don't know. It kind of sounds like whining a little bit to me, but I thought Nebraska, they have a tough game after this. They play Ohio State coming off a bye week, coming off that Oregon loss. So I don't want to say they're necessarily looking ahead, but Indiana could be a team you look past, even with with the undefeated record. And Nebraska's got to remember they're fighting for their life. They're only 5-1, so they're still technically right there in the thick of the Big Ten, championship game, and on the verge of a playoff berth. They were able to finish out the season without winning, maybe 2 losses, but this one's in Bloomington. I think Indiana is turning the corner with Curt Cignetti, and I think that they're going to pull this one out. I have Indiana winning 30-28. Not coverage, nice. But 30-28.
Yeah, gotcha. Love it, love it, love it, love it. So, okay, so we're in agreement there. We were not in agreement very much last week, and I should have agreed with you more, by the way. So I forgot to say that you were 5-4, I think, against the spread, and I was like 2-7 or something like that. Awful. But you know what? I'll take 2-7 with the one of those games.
You had some upset picks, though. You went out on a limb a couple times last week. So
yeah, it sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, so we got Alabama and Tennessee, the next game here, and then okay, so Alabama, another curious case of a Kalen DeBoer team that looks so good in the first half against Georgia. Everybody's enamored after that game. But if you really go back and you think about it, they played a really good first 2.5 quarters or whatever that was, right? Didn't look good. And they haven't looked good really since. They played in spurts. But they've had, they have the loss to Vandy, then they have the close game to South Carolina. And for me, I'm kind of wondering, okay, like, is this team, did the SEC figure these guys out, right? Have they figured this Kalen DeBoer offense out? And Tennessee's defense is really, really good. They're good. I think that that's probably, in my opinion, that's one of the best things about this team is their defense. If you go through their stat sheet, I mean, they're fourth in scoring defense, passing defense. They're 19th, and run defense, they're 5th. They give up less than 80 yards a game running, rushing. So Alabama, on the other side of the ball, Alabama rushing offense is 51st. They, rushing for about 180, but the pass defense, if you look at the passing defense, they're 19th, 170. So something's got to give there. And Alabama's passing offense has come off a little bit. I think they're at 63rd, 213 yards a game. And so this goes back to my original thoughts on, Jalen Milroe. I've got questions about him as a passer, and I've had those questions, and they still remain. And it looked like after the Georgia game, I thought, okay, he doesn't have any. There's no issues there. And then, he has one interception, which I wouldn't even say is a bad one against Vandy. But then the South Carolina game happens, and you start kind of, to me, I start wondering. I'm going, okay, so those concerns to me are back on the table here, and they're going to be in a big way against Tennessee. I think that's a really, really, really intense environment. It's going to be a really tough place for those guys to play. They go 110,000 deep, right? Is it 110? Yeah, 110 deep, 110. Loud, crazy, and drunk. It's going to be a wild atmosphere. And one thing those guys do is they hate Alabama. And so it's going to be, to me, Alabama is going into this environment, and we're going to find out a lot about that team. Now, in these situations, Kalen DeBoer, this is when I think he coaches the best. This is when I think he does his best game prep when these guys have big games. And I watched it all last year. You even watched it at Fresno State. Kalen DeBoer is not his teams, for some reason, I feel like in big games, they don't get rattled. They come out and they just execute. And so if they do that here, we're going to find out that they're probably the team that we thought they were versus Georgia. If they don't do that here, it could be a problem because Tennessee can play. If Tennessee gets an early turnover or two, that could flip the ball game. My concern, though, right now, with Tennessee, is how they've played since conference hit. And so I don't know what's going to happen with Tennessee. If you just go down the stat sheet, they're 9th in total offense at 484 yards a game. Scoring offense, they're 7th. 7th in rushing offense, 19th in passing offense. And it's like you look at those stats and you go, that's great. Well, in conference play, Tennessee's 102nd now in the country at 329 yards a game. They drop way down. They're 95th in points per game and 56th in rushing yards per game and 108th in passing yards per game. So that's in conference. So that is a stark contrast to how they have been, and that's part of what we were talking about is playing all these patsies, right? You play these patsies and you pad your stats. And Nico Iamaleava has looked very, very, very freshman-like since they've gotten into conference. And, I mean, some peculiar, plays, obviously, at the end of the Arkansas game, not just, giving his guys a chance to make a play there. The Oklahoma game, he looked good in spurts, made some really good throws maybe down the stretch, but just still, very very freshman-like, I think, overall is what I'm gathering. And kind of like we talked about with Nebraska and Dylan Raiola, that's kind of what you get. That's where you get inconsistency. Now, Alabama does give up some yards on offense. They give up some yards on defense. I mean, and so it's going to be, to me, this is a very interesting battle of which team is going to show up for this game. Right now, I'm going to take the Tide. I'm going to take the Tide to go in. I had the Tide losing this game for almost all the season until recently. I cannot think now. If Nico's at home and he gets that that home and he's riding that high, yeah, they'll probably win. But I've just watched Kalen DeBoer go into environments, and when the game settles in, his teams play better and better and better and better, and he just performs well in big games. So except for maybe the national championship last year, right, where they got it handed to him. But Tennessee, I don't think Tennessee's that. I don't think they're that. So I have Alabama winning this game 35-30.
Yeah, to beat Alabama, you have to be able to throw the football. That's how Vandy did it, and that's why Georgia almost came back and pulled off that upset, being down 28-0 at one point. And so, as you mentioned, that conference stat for Nico, that's really what's it's because at first I was still thinking home field advantage. Josh Heupel has already beat Alabama once when Saban was there, and so they've had some success, but then I started, like you said, diving into the numbers a little bit more, and yeah, Nico just pretty pedestrian, once conference play started, and Joe Milton, on the other hand, he's been in so many big moments through his career. I don't think there's anything that's going to be too big for him at this point. Playoffs last year, he's played Georgia, a few times, and so he's in, and I don't think last week's Joe Milton is the. I'm sorry, Jaden. Sorry, Monroe is the same quarterback as what we. I don't know why I keep calling him Joe Milton. Tennessee, I guess. But Jalen Monroe. I don't think that's the same quarterback that is who he is. I guess I'd say. He had a bad week. It was South Carolina. They threw everything they could at him, and he just made mistakes. But I think that, as you mentioned, I think he'll be focused. I think DeBoer. To me, I'm giving him a slight edge. I think Alabama has the edge in the coaching, as far as coaches go in this one. And I think Alabama, I think they'll get it. They rose to the occasion against Georgia. I think they're going to rise to the occasion this week. I think it's going to be a great game. I mean, somewhat of a shootout, maybe not quite the Georgia shootout, because I just don't think Nico can do what Carson Beck was able to do. And Tennessee really has to hope they don't go down. They don't go down by 4 touchdowns the way Georgia did, because I don't see how they're going to be able to climb back in something like that, even being at home. But I have Alabama. I think Alabama's going to pull this one out 28-24.
28-24?
Yep.
Yeah, 28-24. Yep. Gotcha. Yeah, it's going to be really there's a lot of kind of cool matchups in that game, but it's going to be really interesting to watch. And until Kalen DeBoer, really has a poor performance in a big game, during the regular season, I'm going to continue to pick him because I'm sick of betting against the guy and losing. That's what I could tell you.
Yeah, Tennessee just kind of feels like Miami a little bit to me, as far as just they've kind of been able to get this far without playing a tough a hard schedule, and then when they ran into some adversity against Arkansas, they couldn't get the job done. So I think for me that's the difference. And
Yep.
Even in that Vanderbilt game, as we've covered, Milroe played it wasn't on him. I don't feel like. I just think that one just felt like sooner or later they thought they were gonna jump ahead and beat Vandy, and Vandy just kept throwing punches the whole game and ended up pulling that one out. So that's kind of been that was the difference for me.
Yeah, that's what I think everybody thought was like, oh yeah, this is like, we've seen this story before. At least that's what I thought every time I was watching it. Oh yeah, I've seen this story before. Oh yeah, I've seen this story, and then. Wow, I guess I haven't seen this story.
Right. Yeah. We
I thought Alabama was going to win all the way until they didn't. So, all right. So last game is the game of the week, Texas and Georgia. So Quinn is back. So everybody likes to see that, right? So Texas, number one team, pretty much by it, like statistically, they look like number one. The eye test, they look like number one. They've got a great quarterback situation. They've got Quintravion Wisener running the football, right? The freshman. He went for 118 on 13 carries. He had a 9.1 yards an attempt against Oklahoma. And then Isaiah Bond, it was good to see him. I mean, he's an elite. Obviously, the Alabama transfer, he's elite track speed, and he's leading them with. He has 21 catches for 369 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So what about Georgia? What do we make of Georgia? Right? You lose a game. You lose to Alabama. You get almost knocked out, but then you come back and you have shown that your team can play ball. You barely beat Kentucky, but that doesn't look that doesn't look so bad now in retrospect. Kentucky they could just flat out they can play. Maybe they got on track there, putting up 41 against Mississippi State last week, but that's Mississippi State. And so your defense then gave up 31 points. So it's it's hard. Carson Beck, he's looking good. He's looking better. Obviously a new team. ATN, obviously, he's getting, I would say, on track. And then, it's about getting those receivers the football, though, and those guys have to win, and those guys need to win in one-on-one situations, I think, for Georgia. And they've missed a lot of completions throughout the season that they were hitting in the last couple of years, right? They've just missed a lot of things that you're used to seeing Georgia hit on, which is why why when you look down, you say Georgia is their passing offense is 39th. Their rushing offense, I had to look at this stat like 3 times. They're 92nd in rushing. Yeah. That is absolutely crazy to me to think about a Georgia football team with the running backs that they have, the O-line that those guys have, the way that they are just built, that they are 92nd in running the football. Now, they played against Alabama. They played against Kentucky. They played against some good defenses. So probably take that, with a grain of salt a little bit. You could curve adjust that a little bit, but still, 92nd is still subpar by any standard for Georgia, and I'm sure Kirby Smart, does not like that. Run defense is fine. They're 44th. Pass defense 39th. So there's really no they're not the dominant Georgia teams that we've seen in the past. This is just not that team. At the end of the day, you can kind of see what they are. They're just not that team, but that Georgia's got talent, and that they can get better as the season goes. Moving over to Texas, though, Texas looks the part. Scoring defense, 6.3 points a game. That's a crazy stat right there, to only be allowing 6.3 points a game this far into the season. Their passing defense is second. They only allow 126 yards through the air. Now, who have they played that can throw the football?
Nobody.
That's the question about Texas. Is what I promise you is this secondary is going to get tested in a way that it hasn't all season right now. It is going to get this secondary is going to get tested, and it's going to be really interesting to see, because the last time they played against a good passing offense, this Texas defense played against not this Texas defense, but the Texas defense we saw them against a good passing offense was Washington last year in the playoffs, and they got freaking torched. They got torched. Now, is Carson Beck, is he he's probably, similar to what they saw there, Michael Penix Jr., but is the concept the same? No, it's definitely not a concept. They way different conceptually, but still, this is elite athletes. This is an elite quarterback that can throw the football. He can go for 400 yards a game or more if he gets hot. And I think this Texas defense is going to get tested. I have had the entire season Georgia winning this game. The entire season I've had Georgia winning this game. Georgia's another team that concerns me right now because of just recent play. And so, with that said, I look at, so Kirby Smart, who I still think is one of the, I still think he's the standard for college football now of current coaches, and Steve Sarkisian, right, who's up and coming mastermind on offense. And I look at these two, the coaching matchup, and it's a tough one. This is a really tough one to call. Texas has that home field advantage. They're number one in the country. It seems like they have the wind at their back. Georgia seems like they're just reeling and reeling, and like people were just waiting for them. A lot of people said they'd have 2 or 3 losses in this game or in this season. I was not one of those people that thought that, and so I'm gonna kind of I'm probably gonna regret this one, but I think Georgia goes in and I think they pull the upset, and I think it's a 33-30 game, and I think Georgia pulls the upset on Texas. So.
Russian stat you threw out is just that's an eye popper for Georgia as well. In their red zone defense, they're 80th in the country in red zone defense. So they just and I'm sure a lot of that is that Alabama game and so, but nonetheless, and I mean, granted, Mississippi State put up 30 points on them last week, so they just yeah I think that's been the one thing I just can't get my mind around as far as like when it comes to Georgia, and I don't know if they're just relying on Carson, more so leaning on him a little bit more because I guess the running game just hasn't been there because I mean they're in turnover margin they're 81st, and I know that a lot of that is because Carson's just been slinging the ball over the field, and he's made a couple with as much he's passed it you're gonna have a few interceptions here and there, but I think being in Austin, in and it's a fun game because it's a classic like defensive head coach against a offensive minded head coach. And right now, I feel like Georgia's at a little bit of a disadvantage with the way their defense has been playing. And I'm sure Sark's been game planned, had this one marked on the calendar. He's been game planning it up. Texas they want to win the SEC, their first year in the SEC, and and especially with Quinn back. The one thing I question though is like Quinn's ability to stay in the game because Georgia's going to be coming after him, and he's kind of, I mean, I don't want to label him injury prone, but he hasn't been able to get through a season successfully without missing games, and if he goes out, oh man, I mean, you don't want to put Arch Manning in that situation. That's going to be a tough one as well as he played, but still, man, I wouldn't want to do that if I was Texas. So I'm assuming Quinn's going to get through this one healthy. And Texas has such a really good offensive line. I mean, they're I think his name escapes me at the time, but they're the one offensive line player. He's probably going to be the first one. Their tackle is going to be the first one taken in in the draft, first pick taken. And I think that Texas has a lot of things going their way, a lot of momentum. Matthew McConaughey is going to be there, sweating all over the place, and I think Texas is going to pull this one out, 33-28.
33-28. So yeah, that's I mean, I could definitely see that happening. When I'm picking Georgia right now too, part of the factor was that they went into Tuscaloosa and they just experienced this, and so I expect to me it doesn't matter if they're down 14-0 early. They know if they get down early that they have the fortitude to come back and win a game like that. And that's kind of what I'm thinking is probably going to happen. I think I see this one as Texas jumping all over them early, and then Georgia righting the ship. But then letting the game settle in because that emotion, that's what happens. The emotion, and I think that Georgia's going to come back in this game and then take control maybe in the third, later in the third quarter or something like that. I think I can see this game seesawing until then. Now, that being said, if Texas blows the doors off of Georgia, I'm done picking Georgia for the season.
Yeah. Well, another issue for Georgia is not being able to run the ball so well is on third downs. I was looking over this, and the third down conversion, they're 74th in the country. So they have been very successful, probably because without being able to run the ball, they're not able to get in those third and short situations. So they're probably not having very much success on first and second down to get them in that third and short. And so you got more third line, and then of course Beck has to sling the ball over the field, and so like sustaining drives will probably be something that if Georgia's going to pull off this upset, and if you consider an upset, I mean I guess technically with the rankings it is, but I think they're pretty equally matched. But yeah, they're going to have to sustain those drives, and they're going to have to keep Texas out of the end zone. They're going to have to hope that Texas can settle for field goals if they get down there, and not let them score touchdowns because points will be at a premium, I think, in this one. And but that was a great point that you brought up. I think, Georgia, they have been there. They've been down big, and they've shown the fortitude to get in there and bring themselves all the way back in a game to have a chance to win it.
Yeah, and also kind of what drives that is I do think Texas they've been able to steamroll people because they've played they've played all these teams that an offense doesn't have a pulse. And so when it's that same thing, when things aren't hitting, when your defense just goes out, does the job, it's 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. It's really easy for the offense to get in rhythm, right? Because they're just in great situations. They're short field. You're all over it. There's not a lot of pressure because you're just winning by a lot. Then you're at home. Everybody's expecting you to win. I'm sure everybody like on game day is going to be picking them. They're going to hear all week how they're going to beat Georgia, and then all of a sudden you get this team, and this team can score with you, and their defense gets some stops that you're not used to having because it's a good defense. Like Michigan's totally different scenario in the fact that they were inept offensively, right? Inept offense. Oklahoma inept offense, good defense, but inept offensively. Right. And I think Georgia's defense I think they're every bit as good as Oklahoma's defense. I think that even with what they give up, I think they're every bit as good as Michigan's defense. And so, but the offense for Georgia, I think, is much more balanced. They have the athletes. They can win one-on-one against their guys, and Texas has not been tested yet. And that's a big factor, right, in the decision right now is that first time you get tested, and then all of a sudden, you're not hitting on stuff. The other team's hitting on stuff. You're down for the first time in the season. How are you going to react? How is this team going to react to some adversity? Because if they don't jump all over Georgia, they're going to be fighting from a pit, I think, and that's going to be an interesting situation because they just haven't been there. They haven't sniffed that. They really haven't sniffed. I mean, they had a couple competitive quarters or whatever, but it's just like they really haven't been in that situation, especially against a team that's got the same caliber athletes as you. So that's a big part of it. But I can also easily see, as you said, Texas winning. So, a couple of things I do want to discuss is I want to talk a little bit about USC. And I want to hear your thoughts on USC. So, a lot of grumblings of Lincoln Riley, Clay Helton, comparisons. Is Lincoln Riley on the hot seat? He's not a good coach or whatever. And, just people are, I feel like USC fans are really taking that 3-3 record in a very hard way. I still have USC sneaking in the playoffs, and a lot of people think I'm crazy. You're probably one of them. But I have them sneaking in at 9-3. And I think now with Notre Dame's, they're just getting decimated by injuries. And so, but if you're a USC fan, I think you want to see Notre Dame win out. And then you want to beat the pants off them when they come visit you at the end of the season. And so I think that's your formula because you'll have a win against LSU, you'll have a win against Notre Dame, and you have a very close loss to a really good Penn State team. You got a close loss to Michigan, and you lost at Minnesota, which that still doesn't look like a horrible loss right now. And so those are understandable. Now, as far as Lincoln Riley goes, though, the defense is only giving up 20 points a game right now. They were giving up 35 points almost a game at this point last season. And so if you look at it, the actual improvement there and what they have, he now has to build a roster. That's the next task for him is they got to build it in the trenches because they're probably not big enough in the trenches to compete week in and week out yet at the elite level that they want to, right? The Skilly's no problem. They can handle it, but in the trenches, I think that's where their disadvantage is, and that showed up a lot in the Minnesota game. I think that it's really easy to have a knee-jerk reaction if you're a Trojan and be like, we need to get rid of him. This is Clay Helton. Clay Helton had a better record, won Rose Bowls, but this team right here, I think, has some real grit, and I think they're a good football team. USC is a really good football team, and I think it's going to be. Again, I think they're going to run the table here on out. What are your thoughts on USC towards the end of this season?
I agree with you. I think that the bar was just set so high last year with the gaudy offensive numbers and the players that they had that it probably wasn't. It's not realistic to that they're going to be able to exceed or come close to those numbers this year. I don't think. Granted, they still had some inexplicable losses, but a lot of that was Alex, the defense just didn't perform the way that. And Caleb Williams, he made a lot of mistakes in that Notre Dame game last year, threw some picks and things like that. But I guess for me, if Miller Moss could just get back, I know it's weeks ago, almost a month and a half ago, whatever it was, to the guy he was when came in so prepared for that LSU game, I said it last week or in the reaction show. I was so impressed with him in that game, and I just don't feel like he's been the same caliber of quarterback. They have a defense, and I mean, I think they'll be able to, stop Notre Dame. Sometimes Notre Dame gets in these big games, and they're going to be traveling. I mean, I know they make that trip every year over to Southern California, and they, so, but that's a game that is good. If USC's defense shows up, Notre Dame they struggle offensively in big games. And like you said, their number one cornerback just went out, and I hate to hear that, but yeah, they're kind of like you said, decimated by injuries. So I mean, I think that the playoffs are still very realistic for USC, and if that Penn State game won't go down as a bad loss. I mean, Penn State is a very good team. They just, and Drew Aller was just able to get it together when they needed him, and for the most part, I mean, USC was dominating that game at 20-3, and they just left the door open, and Aller was able to push Penn State through and take the win. But yeah, I don't think it's abandoned ship on Lincoln Riley whatsoever. I mean, the guy, I mean, to me, the three greatest offensive minded and quarterback coaches in football right now is Sark, Lincoln Riley, and Ryan Day. I mean, from where I sit, but I think if you just be patient and let let the team I guess finish the year, get through the schedule, let things fall where they may. I don't think it's going to end up I don't think it's going to end up the way that maybe USC fans right now are jumping off the bridge. I don't think it's going to end up that way. I think that they have a very realistic shot at the playoffs still.
Yeah, I look at their schedule. They've got Maryland. They have to travel to Maryland. They have Rutgers at home, which is probably a good thing because Rutgers is that's probably a different story. They have to travel to Seattle for Washington, so again, a game that can be tricky. But then they get Nebraska at home. UCLA, they go to UCLA, but that's you just chalk that one up as a W. And then they get Notre Dame at home. So I don't see a loss. Me personally, I don't really see a loss on that schedule. I see maybe a couple games that you're going to have to really play competitively, but I think I see them actually being able to get loose in a couple of these games, which they really haven't been. Their schedule's been, I mean, that's definitely on the tougher side. I think their schedule rank is pretty high. They haven't, Penn State, that Penn State game, and then they played Michigan at Michigan, so, and then LSU. So those are like the quote unquote big games that they've played. And again, they have Notre Dame on the schedule. So, I look at USC as a program, and this is the difference. And I think part of the problem with USC fans right now is you guys are looking at Oregon, and you're looking at the rich kid on the hill, the rich guy on the hill who has the house at the top of the hill, and you're like, that used to be us. We used to be up on that hill too, and we need to be up on that hill today because they're having so much success. And I just caution USC fans that Lincoln Riley's a good football coach. He's going to get it figured out. He's bringing in elite recruits. He's an elite quarterback coach. He's an elite offensive mind. And he just finally got a good defensive coordinator. And all the metrics, that if you look through all the metrics, they point to USC being a really good football team. That's why they're not falling down in FPI and power rankings and a lot of things. They haven't just fallen a free fall because they're competitive in every single game. They have not really been quote unquote dominated by anybody. Penn State sure didn't. It took their tight end to have 17 catches and 244 yards for Penn State to win that game. It took a 4th and 10 for Drew Aller to escape what looked like a sure sack, right, and just make a throw. I mean, it was just, you're so close on these games. Michigan, it came down to the last play. Minnesota, it came down to the last play where maybe the guy fumbled. So you guys are super close to being undefeated, and you would be thinking about that, right? This is that whole other side of the morning after. What if that didn't happen, or what if that, right? They could very easily be 6-0 and ranked number top 5 team in the country right now. So I feel like for USC fans, don't look too much at up on the hill at that team up there, and just hopefully they end up keeping Lincoln Riley, because I think he is a good coach. I'll be the first to admit that I didn't always think that of him. I didn't always think he was a great coach, and in particular over the last couple of years with the Caleb Williams, era. But that was it's kind of proven itself that it was all defense. Miller Moss is a great quarterback. We learned about him last year in the bowl game where he was damn near perfect, And so I think you got a lot of things of your USC to hold your heads high about, and still, again, with the way things are happening, the SEC is that there's a lot of question about, who's going to win I'm not sure who the best team in the SEC is. I don't think there's a clear favorite right now. In the Big Ten, I don't think there's a clear favorite. Like, there could be 2 lost teams there. Or like I said, you guys might get in as a 3-loss team because you're going to have one of the toughest schedules. And if LSU is USC's best friend right now. So if you want LSU to go win, you want them to win out, and that will look really good for SC. So SC, you're rooting for Notre Dame, and you're rooting for LSU. But the season is not lost.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I don't think Lincoln Riley. I mean, he's out there on the West Coast in California, supreme recruiting grounds. So right now, yeah, Oregon, Ohio State, they're kind of the top dogs, but the gap from USC is not as big as what it may seem. Even though they might have 3 losses, whatnot. But I don't think Penn State. I know they just beat USC, but I don't think James Franklin is near the coach that Lincoln Riley is. I just think that this year Penn State was they loaded up, and it kind of comes in spurts with Penn State as far as like when they get really, really good. And it's like maybe every 3 years roughly. And, they have Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, and Drew Aller, and, Abdul Carter on defense. I know I mentioned him a bunch, but they're going to lose a ton this year. And so, if you stay the course with Lincoln Riley with the way he's been able to recruit and everything, I mean, next year, it's going to, there's brighter days ahead if you're not too happy with the way this year has gone thus far. But I don't think the gap between the top 2 tiers or top 2 teams in the Big Ten right now is that far off from USC, like you said, joining them up on that hill.
Yeah, absolutely. And on Penn State, this is a Penn State team that has a lot of continuity, and they've been together. They have a ton of continuity on this team, older, more mature team, and this is the type of performance. That performance is what you would expect from that team on a road to be able to handle that moment. Which tells us that Penn State is a good football team this year. But you're right. Next year is a complete reload because they lose a ton of all their top talent, and they're going to have to replace it and reload next year. Obviously, with the portal and everything, it's much easier to do. But, that they've got a tall task ahead of them. And USC, to me, USC looks like their best years are ahead of them right now. And so I think this year they set the bar really high, a lot of expectations and maybe unrealistically so, like you said. And so I think just stay the course. This year is going to turn out good. To me, this year's already been a success for them, regardless, because we've seen so many situations where the old USC teams would just kind of give up. And this team has a lot of fight in it. So a lot of fight. But, that was just something I wanted to get to before the end of the show. So thanks so much, Joe, for joining today. And then we will see everybody back on Sunday when we shoot the reaction show. So, Joe Sprague, I'm Josh Rodriguez for Sports Idol Nation. Sports is in our DNA. Hope it's in yours too.